Questions. Questions orales. The honourable member for Thornhill.
Canadians go cold and hungry this Christmas, this Prime Minister is counting down the hours to another taxpayer-funded beach vacation. He and his MPs are taking a 6-week holiday for voting time and time again to quadruple the carbon tax and defeat Bill C-234 as they pressured senators to gut the bill that this House already passed. If they won't axe the tax today, why won't they come to work on Monday and finally take the tax off of farmers so that Canadians can eat this Christmas?
Yeah. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'd like to begin by actually wishing all members in this House a happy holidays. I think everybody will be enjoying time with their families over the holidays, and we look forward to seeing everyone back here in February. But I think it's important to make sure that the facts are right, because it was actually Conservative senators that were bullying independent senators. In fact, the Conservative leader in the Senate was actually sanctioned by the other place for his terrible behavior. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Thornhill.
Speaker, we all know that the biggest bully in this House is the Prime Minister, and he is squashing any hope that Canadians had for getting relief this holiday season. They are doubling down once again on their plan to quadruple tax on gas, on groceries, on home heating, and on everything else. There is hardly enough money for food, let alone Christmas presents. 2 million people are eating in a food bank. Families are left to skip meals, and children write Santa asking for warm boots rather than toys. Why do these Liberals insist on making Santa deliver the basic necessities instead of toys this Christmas?
Yeah. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I, too, would like to wish everybody in this House a Merry Christmas, a Happy Hanukkah, and a Happy Holidays, and a Happy New Year. And I also hope that the Conservatives come back willing to work in the new year. But, Mr. Speaker, Conservatives continue to take farmers for granted. Not only do they vote against Canadian farmers, they've also abandoned Ukrainian farmers, Madam Speaker. Ukraine is the breadbasket of the world, Madam Speaker, and time again, they've been given the opportunity to vote for the Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement, and disappointingly, they voted against it every single time.
Honourable member for Thornhill.
Speaker, we're ready to fight for Canadians every single day in this House, despite them not wanting to. And it turns out that Santa's not the only one flying around the world this Christmas. He's got some serious competition from the Environment Minister. Except for the minister doesn't fly a sleigh. He flies on a private jet. From Beijing to Dubai, he burns fuel and taxpayer dollars just to rub elbows with dictators and pop stars. He emits more carbon in one flight than most Canadians do in a whole year, while telling Canadians to pay more carbon taxes. The more he flies around, the higher the tax goes. So will he park the hypocrisy and finally axe the tax?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Speaking of hypocrisy, Madam Speaker, we know what the Conservatives wanted to give Canadians for Christmas, and that's cuts to the vital programs and services that they care for. In fact, just last week, they voted against $10 a day childcare. They voted against dental care for seniors and for children. They voted against Operation Unifier, which is an important NATO mission to Ukraine. And in fact, when they refer to Ukraine as a foreign land, they forget that the country that is invading them is Russia, which is a border of Canada as well, and we want to protect our sovereignty here at home. That's what they would give to Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Montmagny-Lise-Lake, Kamouraska, Rivière-du-Loup. Madam Speaker, it's nearly Christmas, and too many families are actually dreading their holiday dinner because prices are just too high. Parents will have to choose between feeding their kids or putting gifts under the tree. And it's upsetting, and it's the result of 8 years of this government's policies with their Bloc Québécois allies who want to radically increase the carbon tax. Will the Prime Minister finally listen to our demand that they axe the tax so that Quebecers can enjoy their holidays?
The Honourable Member for the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Environment and Climate Change. Oh, sorry, the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary for Natural Resources. Sorry.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. While the Conservative Party tries to let our planet burn, we will be protecting our communities. While the member for Kelowna Lake Country lets our planet burn, we saw in her own constituency that homes were being lost to forest fires. If my colleague really cares about affordability, he will protect communities from natural disasters. The Conservatives don't care about these disasters. We will protect communities. The Honourable Member. Madam Speaker, I was talking about Christmas and kids' Christmas. Now, in my riding, the Moisson Kamouraska Food Bank is doing extraordinary work, but there's more and more demand. It's up 37% since 2019, and 25% of people who come to the organization have jobs, low-income jobs. After 8 years of this Prime Minister, we can't count on the government or the Bloc to help people. Voting for the Bloc Québécois has a steep price. Will the Prime Minister finally listen to our common sense plan and eliminate taxes so that Quebecers can finally have enough to eat? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm very happy to hear my colleagues speak about Moisson Kamouraska. I wonder what Moisson Kamouraska thinks about the Conservatives who stand against the Canada Child Benefit, which reduces child poverty by 40% in all ridings every month, including in my opposition colleagues' riding. What does Moisson Kamouraska think about the fact that this opposition stands against low-cost, quality child care, which reduces gender equality and puts more money in middle-class families' pockets? The Honourable Member for Saint-Jean. Madam Speaker, the federal government is picking a fight in the area of dental care. Quebec was ready to expand its scope, and Ottawa knows that very well, but Quebec wanted to do so under the RAMQ public plan. But the Liberals and NDP instead decided to choose a private company, Sun Life Insurance, instead of the public plan. Our left-of-centre parties just aren't the same as they used to be. We could simply have had an agreement with Quebec that would have offered better dental care coverage in Quebec. Why are the Liberals and NDP favoring the private sector in healthcare?
What's that?
Minister of Health.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente. Et Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's very clear that the one who is picking fights is the Bloc Québécois. Our party, our government, is looking for solutions.
To restart, because we can't hear him, because I know you all love his jacket and it looks great on him. He's going out this year in style, and it's lovely. But I just want to remind members, we need to hear what the Honourable Minister has to say. The Honourable Minister.
Joyce.
Yes, happy holidays, Madam Speaker. It's very clear that it is the Bloc Québécois that's picking fights, whereas we are looking for solutions to ensure that everyone throughout the country can access dental care. I had good conversations with the Minister of Health, Minister Dubé in Quebec, and I am certain that we can find a productive solution to ensure that dental care is available everywhere. The Honourable Member for Saint-Jean. We're not picking fights, Madam Speaker. We are instead trying to protect our areas of jurisdiction, because that's what it takes to protect our capacity as a nation to make different choices. Quebec wanted better public coverage of dental care, but instead we're going to have more private intervention in the healthcare sector, thanks to the Liberals and the NDP. And this is not just any old insurance company. Sun Life left Quebec in 1978 when they were asked to work in French under Bill 101. Why not respect the will of Quebec? Agree and improve our public healthcare system. The Honourable Minister of Health. Madam Speaker, there's good news. Dental care will be available for everyone throughout the country. Quebecers, Canadians, that's good news. And I wonder why the Bloc Québécois is upset about it. It's really good news for everyone. Yes, there are still details to be refined, and we will speak about that with Quebec to ensure that we reach the right result. But Our goal is to improve the quality of health throughout the country.
Westminster Burnaby.
We all know Canadians are better off when New Democrats are fighting for them in Ottawa. And here's what we exceeded in fighting for in this session: anti-scab legislation to empower workers to fight for better wages and working conditions. For Indigenous, by Indigenous housing to build suitable, affordable homes for First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. National child care and dental care, putting thousands of dollars back in the pockets of Canadians. While the Conservatives vote to gut and cut these services, New Democrats are delivering results, and we'll keep fighting in the new year. But why does this government always wait for the NDP to force them to deliver?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Look, we are very proud of the record that we have delivering $10 a day childcare for families across this country, delivering dental care for low and moderate income children and seniors throughout this country, when we are delivering a sustainable future for Canadians across this country. Madam Speaker, this government is here every day fighting for Canadians, and we are happy to work with any party in this House that wants to support Canadian families, Canadian workers, and the future of this country. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for New Westminster Burnaby.
Thanks to the NDP, Quebecers and Canadians are seeing concrete results: funding for social housing, anti-scab legislation, dental care for millions of Canadians and Quebecers, consumer protections. Just in Quebec alone, nearly 50% of the population will benefit from the NDP's dental insurance. And while Conservatives try to cut services, the NDP is delivering. We know that if we weren't pushing them, the Liberals would drag their feet. Why do the Liberals always wait for the NDP to push them before delivering the help that people need? The Honourable Minister of Health. Thank you, Madam Speaker. And this is why it's so important to work together. To not always simply be attacking, criticizing, and making noise. I really appreciate it when parties present solutions, because this is a difficult time the world over, and it's a good time to work together and find solutions like dental care and other results that this government has brought in for all Canadians. The Honourable Member for Bellechasse-Deschamps-Lévis. Madam Speaker, as Moisson Quebec has pointed out, the face of poverty has changed. 30% of people who go to food banks in the Greater Quebec City area have a job. There are more and more students, new arrivals, and seniors. That's the legacy of this Liberal government and its allies in the Bloc Québécois, who want to radically, as I'll remind you, increase the carbon tax, which is making the prices of everything go up. Will this Prime Minister finally hear reason and give up on his inflationary taxes once and for all? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Yes, we know that this is a difficult time and many Canadians are struggling to make ends meet. It's especially disappointing, with that in mind, that last Friday the Conservatives voted against measures like, for example, the strategy for a school lunch program. We know that children learn better when they have had a good meal. Last week, the Conservatives showed their true colors by voting against that motion. The Honourable Member. I'd like to know what my colleague thinks about our food banks that can barely keep up with demand. For example, La Boucherie Généreuse in Quebec City is preparing twice as many food baskets compared to 2 years ago. That food bank is making miracles, but they still don't know how they're going to manage to get through the next few months. That's the result of the Bloc Liberal coalition. If you vote for the Bloc Québécois, you'll pay a steep price. Will this Prime Minister finally listen and ask the tax to enable families to finally have enough to eat, especially at Christmas, Madam Speaker? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for the question. And I'm glad she also mentioned La Boucherie Généreuse in Quebec City, an organization that I know very well, and which is also wondering how the Conservatives can stand against the Canada Child Benefit, which every month reduces child poverty by 40% in the Quebec City region, and which helps almost 400,000 children throughout the country. How can the Conservatives really say that they care about poverty when they're actually voting against what Moisson Kamouraska, La Bouchée Généreuse, and organizations like them are trying to reduce child poverty?
Madam Speaker, yesterday, Empire Foods, one of Canada's largest grocers, stated that its suppliers were still passing along price increases above the rate of inflation. As costs go up for Canadian farmers and food processors, they have a choice to make: increase prices or go out of business. After 8 years, Canadians have a bad taste of what's in store. When you tax the farmer more and tax the trucker more, Canadians pay more. When will this Prime Minister pull his head out of the sand and acknowledge this carbon tax is the root of food inflation in Canada?
Yeah, bravo! The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Quite the statement from the member opposite, who in the past has voted to not go ahead with tax cuts for the middle class, who's voted against the Canada Child Benefit. Just a few days ago, they voted against more homes being built, Madam Speaker. They voted against, in fact, shelter spaces for women and children who are trying to escape domestic violence. It is true, of course, that Canadians are going through a difficult time. We need to continue to be there for them with supports. The Canada Child Benefit I mentioned, the Canada Dental Benefit, daycare support services, all of that is there, and we'll continue that support, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member of Calgary Centre.
We voted 134 times last week to show this government they had a lack of confidence from the Canadian people. But Canadians are responding to food inflation in two ways, Madam Speaker: buying less nutritious food and lining up for food banks. Reliance on food banks is at all-time highs. Worse to come, this NDP Liberal coalition is committed to quadrupling the carbon tax on Canadian farmers.
Sorry, I'm sorry. Again, there's a lot of individuals who seem to want to contribute, and it's not time to contribute. So I'm going to get the honourable member to repeat his question.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We voted 134 times last week to throw this government out in confidence measures.
Yes.
Canadians are responding to food inflation in two ways: buying less nutritious food or lining up at food banks. Reliance on food banks is at record highs. Worse to come, this NDP Liberal coalition is committed to quadrupling the cost on carbon tax on Canadian farmers. That means that those who can afford it the least will be punished the most. It's obvious this Prime Minister is not worth the cost. There are two options here. Will the government exempt Canadian farmers from the carbon tax, or should Canada import more non-taxed foreign food?
Well done. Parliamentary Secretary, the Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'd just like to point out that that stunt, that overnight filibuster that the member pointed out, cost taxpayers $2 million. So as he preaches about fiscal responsibility, it's a little bit tough to stomach. Madam Speaker, the food report that he references actually said explicitly, and let me quote, "It is misleading to suggest that carbon pricing policies are affecting food prices." Moreover, Mr. Speaker, Trevor Thome said last week, if we got rid of the carbon tax and rebate, then this would harm a much larger fraction of lower and middle income households than it would higher income households. Madam Speaker, the Conservatives are making it very clear who they're standing for. It's big oil and execs and the wealthiest Canadians.
The honourable member Sherwood Parkford, Saskatchewan.
Twas the night before Christmas when the members across doubled down on their plan to keep raising the cost. They set out to do it by taxing the carbon on the hardworking people who do all the farming. This dastardly plan to make our farmers poor was almost disrupted by C-234, but the time is coming for a bigger course correction when Conservatives bring home the carbon tax election. After 8 years, we've gone from feasting to scrap, so for Christmas, will they finally axe the tax?
L'honorable secrétaire parlementaire pour le ministre de l'Agriculture et d'Agroalimentaire.
Mr. Speaker, I want to congratulate him on the great performance, but I'm going to remind him that grain farmers are, every time they come to Ottawa, they ask for new markets. And the Conservatives had a choice last week. They had a choice to support grain farmers and support the Agricultural Bureau in Manila to support the Indo-Pacific strategy. They voted against it. They had a choice, and they voted against this. On this side of the House, we don't not only walk the walk, but we support our farmers.
That's right.
Again, I just want to remind members that if they don't have the floor, they shouldn't be yelling out or heckling or anything. The honourable member for Sherwood Parkford, Saskatchewan.
Madam Speaker, farmers do not like their carbon tax plan. They do not like their pipeline ban. They do not like it here or there. They do not think it's just or fair. It taxes the food the farmer grows. It taxes the tractor when he mows. It taxes the food as it gets trucked. It taxes the people as they get squeezed. Liberal policies are breaking our backs. So when will they finally act tax the tax.
The Honourable Minister.
Madam Speaker, I think what Dr. Zeus is actually concerned about is food security. And food security is actually relevant to that member and the people that he represents in Alberta, because they know, those good Ukrainian Canadians in Alberta know, that Ukraine represents the breadbasket of the world. But you know it's not just Ukrainian Canadians that are disappointed in that member and his caucus. It's Polish Canadians, it's Baltic Canadians, it's every Eastern European person who stands against the authoritarianism of Vladimir Putin. That member has been noted for his combating communist authoritarianism. Where was he last week when we voted on that?
Order. L'honorable député de Drummond.
The Honourable Member for Drummond. We now know how the Google money is going to be split up. Out of $100 million in the agreement, $30 million will be used for electronic media, $7 million for CBC, and the rest for print media. That is not going to fix the media crisis. Not for newspaper, not for TV or radio, not at all. And $7 million for CBC? Really? Every dollar counts and could help to save a local or regional newspaper or radio station. So will the Minister of Heritage ask CBC to not reach into that too small cookie jar?
Climate change?
Merci.
For Drummond. We now know how the Google money is going to be split up. Out of $100 million in the agreement, $30 million will be used for electronic media, $7 million for CBC, and the rest for print media. That is not going to fix the media crisis. Not for newspaper, not for TV or radio, not at all. And $7 million for CBC? Really? Every dollar counts and could help to save a local or regional newspaper or radio station. So will the Minister of Heritage ask CBC to not reach into that too small cookie jar?
Climate change?
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I appreciate my colleague's question. Last month, we announced a historic agreement with Google. It will be paying our journalists for their important work. That agreement will enable newsrooms to continue producing local content for their communities. We know that all media are in a crisis, and we are doing our part so they can continue informing Canadians throughout the country. The Honourable Member. Well, if the government were able to promise that the $7 million would enable Radio-Canada to rehire the 600 people laid off, we might reconsider. But $7 million, while it may be just a drop in the ocean for public media, it's a colossal amount for our small local media. We could easily recuperate $7 million by cancelling Christmas bonuses for the Friends of Catherine Tate or 1 or 2 trips to Australia. Will the government guarantee that CBC will not try to get money from the fund? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thanks again, Madam Speaker. We know that the Conservatives do not value journalists' work, but that's not the case for us. More than 500 newsrooms have had to close over the last 10 years. And that is why we brought in the Online News Act in order to create a fairer environment for journalists versus the web giants. We are at the final stage of C18. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Saskatoon West.
Madam Speaker, after 8 years, the NDP Liberal government has driven up the cost of food for everyone. Canadians know that when you slap a carbon tax on a farmer and then a trucker, these added costs are going to be paid by consumers. Anthony, a dairy farmer in Saskatoon, is currently paying $55,000 every year in carbon tax. It is clear for dairy farmers that this Prime Minister is just not worth the cost. Does the Prime Minister want Anthony to raise prices on consumers, or does he want him to cut production so Canadians are forced to buy dairy from polluting foreign countries?
Parlementaire pour le ministre de l'Agriculture et de l'Agroalimentaire.
Madam Speaker, it is Christmas season, and I actually want to thank all the farmers who are providing food for Canadians. What the honourable member is not telling his constituent and his dairy farmers that last week he had a choice. He had a choice to support dairy farmers and all supply managed sector, and he voted against dairy farmers. He voted against the poultry sector. He voted against the turkey sector. Madam Speaker, the Conservatives love to talk, but when it actually comes to supporting dairy farmers and the supply managed sector, they're nowhere to be found.
The honourable member for Saskatoon West.
Madam Speaker, Canadians do not have confidence in this government, and I'm proud to say that our party voted non-confidence in this government 135 times. Madam Speaker, it gets worse. Instead of supporting Bill C-234 to reduce the cost of food by removing the carbon tax on farmers, this NDP Liberal government is going to quadruple the carbon tax. This will balloon Anthony's carbon tax bill from $55,000 to $220,000 every year. This is guaranteed to increase the price of dairy for Canadian consumers. Madam Speaker, what does the Prime Minister want Anthony to do? To raise prices or cut production and force Canadians to import dairy from polluting foreign farms?
Madam Speaker, I want to thank my honourable colleague for his question. I see the enthusiasm they have on a particular bill on the other side. I don't hear them as loud for supporting C-282, a bill that we unanimously supported on this side of the House that supports supply managed. Where is that member's support for C-282 that's on the other side of the House, which supply managed sector dairy farmers, turkey farmers, the egg farmers, and the chicken farmers are all asking us to support? Where is that member in that party's caucus support for C-282?
The honourable member for Portage-Lisgar.
Madam Speaker, this Prime Minister's carbon tax is taking direct aim at Canadian farmers and hitting our grocery prices. This Liberal government doesn't know Jack, who's a grain farmer from southern Manitoba, who's paying $6,000 in carbon taxes on his most recent bill. And when this Liberal government quadruples their punishing carbon tax, he'll be paying $24,000 in a single month. How will the Prime Minister advise that Jack pays that $24,000? Will he be raising prices on Canadians, or should Jack cut back on production, or should Canadians be forced to import more polluted foreign food from foreign farms?
Honourable Minister.
The member from Portage-Lisgar should be embarrassed and he should be ashamed of himself. Last weekend, during the temper tantrum, he voted against Prairies Can, an initiative, an organization that has invested millions of dollars in Portage-Lisgar. He voted against them. He voted against the Human Rights Museum, Canada's only major national museum in Western Canada. He voted against Ukrainian Immigrant Settlement Services in Manitoba. He should be ashamed.
The honourable member for Portage-Lisgar.
Madam Speaker, I am so proud, and my constituents are extremely happy that I voted non-confidence against this government 135 times last week. And it's become clear after 8 years that this Prime Minister is simply not worth the cost. Certainly not to Jim in my riding, who's paying $5,000 a month to heat his poultry barn, and this NDP Liberal coalition is planning on quadrupling that, costing him $20,000 a month. So how do they expect Jim to pay that $20,000 a month? Is he going to cut back on production, raise prices for Canadians, or are we going to be forced to import food from more polluting foreign farms?
Yeah. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As members of Parliament, we are representatives of the constituents in our ridings, and they send us to Ottawa with one very important job, and that's to vote on government policies and programs. Yeah. And last week, the Conservatives voted on over 120 items that Canadians depend on. And that member and all the members of the Conservative Party voted against farmers. They voted against supporting supply-managed sectors like poultry, dairy, egg, and turkey. And they need to stand accountable for the fact that they stand against farmers and they stand against our agricultural sector. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Yeah, it's getting a little loud again. I'm not sure if people are forgetting where they are, but the honourable for North Island, Powell River.
Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, everyone deserves to know that they'll make it home safely at the end of the day. Weather stations in North Island Powell River are vital to this, but poor upkeep and underfunding by both the Liberals and Conservative governments have left our weather stations in ruins. We need real action now to fix this problem. Will the government make sure these weather stations are working or continue to neglect the maintenance of infrastructure people rely on for safety?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary of the Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I really appreciate the advocacy from the member opposite, who I know recognizes that in modern times, the incidences of extreme weather events happen more frequently because of climate change, and we have an obligation to ensure that the data and the reporting from those weather stations is up to date and fully functional. And that has a direct impact on the safety of our neighbors, particularly during the winter months and particularly when folks are traveling. So I sincerely appreciate the question from the member, and I'd be happy to touch base after question period with the member to discuss how we can make sure that Canadians stay safe over the holidays.
The Honourable Member for Timmins, James Bay.
In 2019, I put forward a motion for a national suicide prevention strategy, and it received all-party support. But since that time, the Liberals have broken their promise to deliver the Canada Mental Health Transfer to the provinces. But I am really concerned that this past week, the Conservative Party voted against the National Suicide Prevention Hotline, as well as voting against clean water on reserves. That would have a huge impact in my region. So we now know the Conservative leader would break any promise on mental health. But I want to know, will the Liberals finally commit to implementing the full national suicide prevention strategy so that people are not playing political games on such important issues as mental health and suicide prevention?
L'Honorable Secrétaire Parlementaire.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
It's so important question. In fact, I totally agree with him. On a commencé cette stratégie.
We started that strategy. We continued the strategy by implementing on November 30th the 988 line, the suicide prevention hotline, which has been very successful so far. The line received calls in its first hours. People are well trained and ready to help Canadians in their difficult moments.
Madam Speaker, our government is unwavering in our support for Ukraine, but there are troubling signs internationally and in this House. This week, President Zelensky urged American politicians not to succumb to far-right, MAGA-inspired plans to abandon Ukraine. Unfortunately, we are fighting the same fight here in Canada, with Conservatives voting against the Free Trade Agreement, voting against Operation Unifier, and against military aid for Ukraine. This week, Vladimir Putin said that Western support for Ukraine is waning and that he will win the war. The situation is dire for all of us. Can the Parliamentary Secretary share with Canadians what we're doing to support the Ukrainian people in their fight for their own survival, for global security, and for Canada's security?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you to the member for Etobicoke Centre for his tireless advocacy. Earlier this week, President Biden urged Republicans not to give Vladimir Putin an early Christmas gift and abandon Ukraine. Well, it looks like Christmas came early for the MAGA-inspired Conservatives right here in Canada. While they're busy voting against trade, against Ukraine, we will not waver. At the International Trade Committee, we heard directly from industry groups, the UCC, and the Ambassador of Ukraine, who supports this modernized trade agreement. I hope our colleagues across the way will take some time over the holidays to reflect, come to their senses, and support this trade agreement with Ukraine.
Honourable Member for Langley-Aldergrove.
Rocky Ridge Turkey Farm in Langley just received their heating bill, $3,000, and shockingly, a quarter of it is carbon tax. And when it quadruples, Farmer Steve's heating bill is going to be 60% carbon tax. It's ridiculous. After 8 years of this NDP Liberal government, it is clear that the Prime Minister is just not worth the cost. So what's his advice to Farmer Steve? Is it to raise prices on Canadians, or is it to cut production so that Canadians are forced to import food from foreign polluting farms?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister for Agriculture and Agri-Food.
And I actually want to thank the turkey farmers who are doing an amazing job of providing turkeys for all of us during Christmas. But the one thing that the entire supply managed sector is asking of us is to support C282. And I know that caucus is split, but our caucus is unified in terms of supporting our dairy farmers, our turkey farmers, our egg farmers, our chicken farmers. Where's that member support and where's that caucus support for Bill C282 in the other chamber?
The Honourable Member for Langley-Aldergrove.
Well, where's the support from the Liberals for Common Sense Bill C234, which they rejected? A common sense solution to tackling food inflation. Why did this Prime Minister reject supporting Canadian farmers and the citizens who rely on them for a good, safe, affordable food supply?
The Honourable Minister.
What I want want for Christmas is for that member of the Justice Committee and his colleagues to end their antics and stop playing with people's lives. I'm talking about David and Joyce Milgaard's law. That's a law that will change the way we address wrongful convictions and end systemic discrimination. Reversing a wrongful conviction should never be a partisan matter, but filibusters by that member and his colleagues at the committee has made it exactly that. These delays mean that potentially wrongfully convicted people, like Indigenous people and Black people languishing in our prisons, will just languish a little longer. That's reprehensible behavior, Madam Speaker, and that needs to be corrected immediately.
The honourable member for Edmonton West.
Madam Speaker, places of worship in Edmonton have always helped with food hampers for those in need, regardless of their faith. Now, after 8 years of this NDP Liberal government, they are seeing record increases of those seeking help. So what's the government's solution? More carbon taxes. One church alone in my riding is facing a bill of $30,000 in carbon taxes this year alone. Government's probably not aware, but they can't pass those costs on to their congregants. So when will this government axe the tax so places of faith can have more to give to families in need?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Well, Madam Speaker, I think it's essential that we be straight with people who are going through difficult times. That those difficult times are felt all over the world. And the fact that Canada is doing better than just about any other country in the world is cold comfort to people who are suffering. But what they need is solutions. Solutions like dental care, so that seniors can get the dental care that they need, that 1 million children can get the dental care they need. But of course, the Conservatives voted against it. And so what they do by trying, it's really about not taking action on climate and cutting support for vulnerable people. That's really what this is about, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Abitibi-Témiscamingue. Pardon, the Honourable Member for Beauce. Thank you, Madam Speaker. After 8 years, the costly Bloc Liberal coalition wants to drastically increase the carbon tax, which will drive up the price of all food. They are so out of touch with reality. It costs a lot to vote Bloc. 12,500 requests per month. That is the rate of food bank use in my region. According to the organization Marie Champagne of Moisson in Beauce, that's an increase of 82% over the past few years, and more than a third of these requests are for children. Will the Prime Minister follow our common sense plan to eliminate inflationary taxes and deficits so that Canadians can eat this Christmas?
L'Honorable Ministre.
The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Conservatives are constantly talking about the price on pollution. Well, there are a few things that are very clear. Pollution does exist, climate change does exist, and carbon pricing and pollution pricing will contribute to reducing emissions. The Conservatives are no longer welcome in the Magdalen Islands, and they won't visit the Plains of Abraham either because they voted against the Plains of Abraham. They voted against they're against the Festival of Saint-Tite, but they might be able to visit Bay Saint-Paul, where there was a catastrophic event, a disaster, a flood a few weeks ago that destroyed tons of businesses and homes. Can the member send his climate-denying leader to Bay Saint-Paul to understand that climate change does exist? The Honourable Member for Abitibi-Témiscamingue. Thank you, Madam Speaker. The federal government has one last chance before the Christmas holidays to avert a wave of small and medium enterprise bankruptcies. The government must extend the January 18th deadline for repayment of the emergency account without loss of subsidy. At a time when inflation is eating into families' Christmas shopping budgets, at a time when restaurant patronage is down by 20% and bankruptcies have risen 81% since last year, the survival of our main streets and the survival of our small local businesses is at stake. Will the federal government finally, please, extend the deadline to allow our SMEs to get through the winter?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Small Businesses.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The CEBA program provided unprecedented support to nearly 900,000 small businesses and helped keep them open, their doors open and their lights on. Last year, our government already extended the forgiveness qualification deadline by 1 year to the end of this year. We know that times are still tough, Madam Speaker, and that's why our government extended the full loan for another year, Madam Speaker. We are going to continue to listen to small businesses throughout this time, and we're going to continue to have their backs, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Abitibi-Témiscamingue. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, according to Statistics Canada, over 98,000 SMEs don't know whether they will have the cash to repay the emergency account or whether they will have access to the credit that they need. There are 98,000 businesses in limbo. It's not just SMEs that need reassurance before the holidays. It's hundreds of thousands of workers, too. The January 18th deadline is a sword of Damocles hanging over the heads of all of these people. Will the government postpone the deadline to reassure these people that they will not lose their jobs right after the holidays?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, that is why we are offering additional flexibilities for small businesses to repay their CEBA loans. This includes a full one-year extension on the term loan repayment deadline, more flexibility on refinancing, and more time to access the loan forgiveness, which is both a balanced and fiscally responsible approach. We know that times are tough, which is why our government will also be cutting taxes for growing small businesses and lowering their credit card fees by up to a quarter, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for St. Albert, Edmonton.
Madam Speaker, the Liberals' billion-dollar green slush fund is mired in corruption. Tens of millions of taxpayers' dollars have been funneled to companies that board members have an interest in. And yesterday at the Industry Committee, the former chair dismissed this corruption as the normal course of business. In other words, it's business as usual. After 8 years of this NDP Liberal government, can the minister explain why corruption and self-dealing are business as usual?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Let's be clear. As soon as we found out about these alleged allegations, the Department of ISED acted quickly. Minister of Innovation has already accepted the resignation of CEO and Chair. We take these allegations extremely seriously, which is why we're following proper due diligence. Our government is committed to ensure that organizations which receive federal funding adhere to the highest standards of governance. We are committed to get to the bottom of these allegations. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for St. Albert, Edmonton.
Madam Speaker, according to the whistleblower, more than $150 million has been misappropriated by Liberal insiders at the Green Slush Fund. And yet, incredibly, the minister continues to stand behind the board, a board that has engaged in self-dealing to the tune of tens of millions of dollars. This is scandalous. It begs the question, what does the minister know? When did he know about it? And who is he protecting?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Well, Madam Speaker, of course, the member opposite knows this agency was created 20 years ago. It operates at arm's length. And I'm not sure what the member is saying. Is he saying that if they were in government, that he would actually be interfering and managing the organization? Or is he saying that if he saw malfeasance, that he would do what we did, which is to call in immediately those to review what's occurred? Because what this is really about is them being against taking action on climate change and being beholden to a base that has MAGA values.
So, again, order. The Honourable Member knows full well that if he has other questions, he can ask for a late show to expand on his question today. The Honourable Member for Kamloops, Thompson, Caribou.
Madam Speaker, after 8 long years of this NDP Liberal government, we know that they're just not worth the cost. We have this government's billion-dollar green slush fund. And what do we have following that? Over $150 million that appears to have been criminally misappropriated. Rather than word salad explanations of, we're investigating, we can say this: there's an Auditor General investigation. There's an ethics commissioner, or there's an ethics investigation times 2. Why won't they just call in the RCMP?
The Honourable Minister. Parliamentary Secretary. Not the Honourable Minister. I got it.
Minister. Merry Christmas, Madam Speaker. I hope you have a wonderful holidays. Listen, as we go away, we know that Canadians have had a hard year. We know that we've suffered with global inflation. We've had troubles with war in Ukraine and elsewhere. We've had, of course, the after effects of the pandemic and climate change. But despite that, I think Canadians can feel good about the fact that we still have the lowest net debt to GDP ratio in the G7, and that we have lifted millions of Canadians out of poverty. We have done that by investing in programs like healthcare, like dental care, like the CCB, like $10 a day childcare, like retirement security, and like investments in communities like the Jewish Centre for Greater Vancouver, all investments that the
The honourable member for Egmont.
Madam Speaker, Atlantic Canada has had its fair share of challenges over the past 3 years. A deadly hurricane, natural disasters, and a global pandemic have left Atlantic Canadians wondering what the future holds. Can the Minister of Rural Development, Anna Coa, outline for the people in my Egmont riding what our government is doing to help Atlantic Canada recover, rebuild, and thrive?
Well done.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I want to thank the member from Egmont, who's a strong voice for PEI and for Atlantic. Down east, we have a saying. It's called Tory times or tough times. And man, last week the Conservatives reminded us why, because they voted against funding to help us rebuild from Hurricane Fiona. They voted against funding for small businesses to grow and create good jobs. They voted against support for our manufacturers and our farmers, and they voted against funding to support Marine Atlantic, which is a vital service between a ferry service between Newfoundland and Nova Scotia. 'Tis a season of colourful lights, Madam Speaker, but last week they showed us their true colours. Just when Harper was in charge, they continue to treat Atlantic Canada as...
The honourable member for Calgary Heritage.
After 8 years, Beijing-backed rating of Canadian resources is at an all-time high. First, they got this Prime Minister to fast-track the sale of neolithium. Now they're working on a deal to buy critical minerals in the Northwest Territories through acquiring vital minerals. Yesterday, the Industry Committee passed a motion calling on the minister to invoke the Investment Canada Act to protect this critical Canadian resource. Will the minister listen to this committee and review this deal today?
Yeah. Bravo. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, our government has been clear we will always welcome foreign investments and trade that encourages economic growth, innovation, and employment opportunities in Canada. We know that economic security is national security. This bill, which will amend the ICA, brings forward improvements so our government can act more quickly when required. We'll continue to ensure Canada's prosperity while acting decisively to protect our national and economic security. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for Calgary Heritage.
They can act today. They need to act today. You can really see where this Prime Minister's heart lies with that non-answer. Not with Canadian resources, not with Canadians, but with his love for Beijing's basic dictatorship. The same love that put 3 other Canadian lithium companies at risk of CCP takeover, and now our only rare earth mining company. Will the minister do the right thing, put Canadians first, and invoke the Investment Canada Act today?
Yay! Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, the Investment Canada Act provides for the review of the most significant investments by non-Canadians to ensure their likely net benefit to the Canadian economy. All investments, no matter their value, are subject to a national security review under the Investment Canada Act. Therefore, the acquisitions of a Canadian company by a foreign company would be subject to a review under the ICA. Due to the confidentiality provisions of the Act, we cannot comment further on this very concern that the member had. Thank you.
The honourable for Renfrew, Nipissing, Pembroke.
Madam Speaker, after 8 years, Canadians know higher food prices are this NDP Liberal coalition's official policy. Bob and Pat down in Douglas just paid $170 in carbon taxes on their propane bill to dry their corn. Now, Bob and Pat cannot pass this carbon tax on to customers. They have to take the market rate. Bob and Pat absorb all the taxes. Will the Prime Minister tell Bob and Pat by how much they have to cut food production in order to stay alive?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Madam Speaker, on behalf of military families across Canada whose loved one deployed as part of Op Unifier to help strengthen Ukraine, I am ashamed that the member opposite, coming from Pembroke, actually voted against, with every Conservative across the way, against funding for Op Unifier and military families. Our children, our family members deployed overseas to support Ukraine, and not one of them supported it. Thank you.
The honourable member, Calgary Skyview.
Madam Speaker, the world has experienced its warmest year ever, with Canadians facing devastating and deadly wildfires. At COP28, Canada advocated to secure ambitious outcomes to keep the Paris Agreement goal of limiting warming to 1.5 degrees within reach. With the support of a strong and diverse Canadian delegation, the Minister of the Environment and Climate Change was proud to represent Canada at this important conference. Can the Parliamentary Secretary inform this House on the work Canada has done?
Excellent question.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, the Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I'd like to thank my honourable and hardworking colleague for his question, but also for his commitment to climate action, Madam Speaker. COP28 was a remarkable meeting, Madam Speaker, where the world came together to commit to lowering our reliance on fossil fuels drastically, in fact, phasing them out, and a commitment to triple renewable energy. And at the same time, Madam Speaker, our government committed to an oil and gas emissions cap, Madam Speaker, and lowering our oil and gas emissions by 75%. We also committed to bringing forth legislation for nature protection in 2024. Madam Speaker, Canadians can continue to rely on Liberals to be champions for the environment and climate change here in Canada and abroad.
The Honourable Member for Nunavut.
The Liberals are putting our coast and Indigenous communities at risk. After spending $31 billion on the TMX pipeline, the Liberals are pushing almost 900,000 barrels of oil through unceded territorial waters of Pacheedaht First Nation. And now the Liberals stopped any discussions with the Pacheedaht First Nation about creating a marine safety center nearby. Why does the minister have no issue handing billions to oil and gas but can't spend on basic protections for Indigenous communities?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Natural Resources.
Madam Speaker, reconciliation is always at the center of the work that we do, and we take it very seriously. I want to make sure that we can underline that fact. When it comes to protecting our lands and including the voices of Indigenous peoples, we take that very seriously, and it is at the center of the work that we do. I thank the member opposite for raising her concerns, but we will always be standing for a viable and strong natural resources sector that includes all voices as we move forward.
Good job. Good job.
And that brings us to the end of the question period. I do want to first, before we go to point of orders, I do want to just, and before everybody leaves, I just want to wish everybody a very Merry Christmas, safe travels. Want to thank the clerks and the pages and everyone that helps us here on the Hill to make sure that it functions well and that we're able to do our work. And I, of course, want to thank the good people of Algoma, Manitoulin, Kapuskasing, and the fact that I became a grandma this morning as well. So. Again, yes, work on. So it'll be a great Christmas. I have a point of order. The Honourable Member for North Island, Powell River.
Is that a point, Speaker? And congratulations on becoming a grandmother. It's a beautiful thing. There have been consultations, and I hope that if you seek it, you will find consent for the following motion: that notwithstanding any standing order or usual practice of the House, the remainder of the debate pursuant to Standing Order 66 on motion number 45 to concur in the 12th report of the Standing Committee on Finance will be deemed to have taken place, the question been deemed put, and a recorded division be deemed requested and deferred pursuant to Standing Order 66 bracket 2. Thank you.
I'm already hearing some no's, so therefore it is not approved. We have another point of order. The Honourable Member for Kelowna Lake Country.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Recently at the Human Resources Committee, at the HUMA Committee, we had testimony from the CEO of the Central Okanagan Food Bank, who stated that they're expecting an additional 100% increase in food bank usage over the next 3 to 4 months. So,
no, is the Honourable Member trying to table documents, or is she looking for a motion?
I'm sure you'll find unanimous consent to take.
No, there is already not unanimous consent. Again, on the unanimous consent motions, I just want to remind members that they really need to have conversations with each of the party's leaders, House leaders, and then we can maybe be able to move these motions along as long as we have unanimous consent. Is this all points of orders? Yes? The Honourable Member for Renfrew, Nipissing, Pembroke.
Madam Speaker, we just received news that the Calgary Food Bank has doubled its number of veterans that are coming in for helping food. I'd request that I can table this report, this very important report about our veterans.
No, I'm already hearing no's. No, not willing to table the report. The Honourable Member Saskatoon Grasswood.
Madam Speaker, yesterday in committee, the Environment Minister admitted to bullying 6 senators trying to gut Bill C-234. Can you imagine that?
Honourable member, is this a motion, or then it's a part of debate? So the honourable member can raise that during debates. The honourable member for King Vaughan, King Vaughan,
yeah,
yes.
You got it right. Congratulations on becoming a grandmother. You'll be able to spoil that beautiful little baby. If you seek it, Madam Speaker, I haven't even said it yet. Give me a break. If you seek it, Madam Speaker, I hope you will find unanimous consent for the following motion.
I just mentioned about the unanimous consent motion, so obviously there hasn't been consultation with the other members of the other parties, or the honourable member's already been told that she wouldn't get unanimous consent. So I just want to remind members that needs to happen, and it hasn't happened, so the honourable members have already said no to any an unanimous consent motion. The honourable member for Caribou Prince George.
Congratulations, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise on with respect to the newly elected Premier from Northwest Territories, R.J. Simpson, who's asked for a carve-out from this government's penalizing carbon tax.
Is this a motion again?
I believe you'll find
there's not unanimous consent. I'm already hearing no's. Is this another point of order? The honourable member for, just a second here, I'm drawing a blank, Aurora, Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And I just wanted to point out that I was in the committee meeting that the members opposite referred to when he stood, and what he said was in fact factually incorrect.
Yeah, though, I mean, you know, what's happening at committee I can't really weigh on as a speaker, and this is a point of debate. L'honorable.
The honourable member for Mégontic-l'Érable. Thank you, Madam Speaker. As you know, the points of order can be raised after question period during what was said during that time. And during question period, there was a mention of a 27% increase in Quebec, which is, if members... Madam Speaker, what's your point order about? I would like to ask for a leave to table documents. No, there is no consent for that.
For Portage-Lisgar has point of order.
Point of order. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and congratulations on the birth of your recent grandchild. And I'd also like to wish my honourable colleague across the way, the House Leader, a good next month as she heads into her birth. And as somebody that's having a child in early January with a very similar due date, I can commend you for the work that you're doing at 8 months pregnant in this House. But I rise today on a fairly urgent matter, as it has come to light very recently that Canadian families will be paying $700 more on groceries next year, and I would seek unanimous consent to table the Canada's food price.
Table documents, or is this a motion?
For unanimous consent.
Well, there's already individuals saying no. You know, we'll be able to. Again, if you can go and have those conversations before coming to the House, it'll be a lot easier. The honourable member for Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes Brock.
Thank you very much, Speaker. Coming out of question period, 133.
Order. I have a point of order here. I'd like to hear it.
Coming out of question period, 133 Ontario chiefs have taken the federal government to court over what they